I know that you are the queen of being a clinician and the research, and you know where it comes from, what causes it, what happens in the brain.
Yeah.
And so I always say that you are responsible for diagnosing the pathology. I'm stuck with trying to figure out the path. Like, I don't have time to figure out how, especially in business, these people became untruthful to themselves, whether they kept jobs too much or they were top performing. This is one that I've had many times.
Tell me.
Where top performing salespeople have really bad behavior. It could be totally inappropriate in the office. They could be breaking every law known to mankind about fraternization in the office, every policy, but because they're the highest producer, people look the other way. And
Priorities.
yes, yes. So when the book came out on Steve Jobs, and he had the habit of, and he was the top of that little apple cart,
Clearly.
no pun intended, or all puns intended, he got away with, at a really outrageous level, what was known, or what they dubbed, the reality distortion field, which came out of a Star Trek episode. And instead of saying, Steve, you're lying, Steve, you're not telling the truth, Steve, stop doing that, they would kind of soothe each other and use this little lingo. And I really was attracted to that.
Can you give us an example?
Well, the high-performing salesperson in a brokerage, or a high-performing salesperson in the medical industry, in the equipment industry where the revenues are really high, or in the drug industry. You can have a person behaving on the road in ways that go against all of your policies.
Like
Maybe taking the female nurses out and taking them back to your hotel rooms, and they're your clients, and maybe that isn't the best thing for you to be doing, but you got the sale. So are we going to make you stop doing that? Okay? Or you are totally, you're a broker, and you completely antagonize the junior brokers, the new people who come in. You tend to make your numbers in the first half hour of any given month. You've bought your seat for the entire month. So you're just going to aggravate and distract and demean. A lot of shaming and demeaning in brokerage firms, in really high intense financial environments. Everyone looks the other way. Why? Because that person who could get those numbers done in the first half hour doesn't just stop in that half hour. They fill up the whole rest of that month, and they are the top performer. So and who comes into your office? Those junior people.
It's not usually the person who's the highest performer, although
There
if they
you
do,
go.
that's a gift because we can work through it.
Right. But what ends up happening is you're getting all of the people who are being shamed at work.
And they're feeling beaten down and sad and less than. And they're being told that they're less than. It may even
Absolutely.
be a very abusive environment.
And they have no support. Obviously, management's not doing anything about it. Letting it go.
So the first thing I would do is say, what do you want to be different? What do you want to be different about this situation? And then, what would it take for that to happen? I think it is highly unrealistic, if you're a person in that situation, to actually think that the environment you're in is going to change. Or
Correct.
that bully boss that you have is going to change.
Correct.
You have no control over it. If he does or she does, awesome. But that can't be the expectation. That can't be where we start. We start with you.
Right.
So you're in this crummy environment. Would you like to quit? Is there something else that
Because
you
at
would
some
like to
point, they chose to be in the system. They knew before going in. Certain systems, certain industries have histories. The brokerage industry, investment banking industry, they do have reputations on how they operate. So when I go to Harvard and I get my MBA, or Stanford and get my MBA, and then I choose to work with one of those firms, I am not completely unaware of the culture.
Right. You have to be aware of the culture. And if you're not, you're going to learn it in 5 minutes, right, from when you
Yeah.
start. And
Nope.
maybe you say, wow, this is not a culture I want anything to do with. And maybe that's great.
Right.
Or maybe you get there and you go, I want to make a lot of money. I'm going to work in this culture.
And that's, where I have seen things happen is that you believe you can tolerate it. They truly go in, they're not naive. We all read the same business magazines. We know roughly, we know how we would prefer it to be, but I'm stronger, I'll be able to tolerate it because I have other goals that I want to do. And then I get there and I realize, wow, the money isn't making me feel any better because I feel miserable all the time.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you a really typical situation I see at work. You have person A, who's the superior, more powerful person in the company.
Right.
And let's say they're the person that you're talking about. They're the salesperson. They are kind of narcissistic because they're doing really well. They're confident. They like themselves. They think they're an example and sort of a pinnacle of their occupation. And then you have the people who work for them, who want to do a good job, are learning the ropes, want to impress their boss. One thing that both of them do is they lie to themselves about how they contribute to conflict in that work environment. So for example, the boss might think, I'm going to tell this person that they suck and they're not good at this, and I'm going to tell them that because it's true and maybe it'll motivate them to do better. Which is justifying behavior that really is disrespectful and unnecessary.
Correct.
Then the subordinate person might say to themselves, well, I'm really not that good, or try to overcompensate, so they really kiss their butt and try to be kind of overly nice and overly, I'm going to win him over at some point. And you can create this dynamic where actually both parties are lying to themselves and equally responsible for the work environment that's highly toxic for everyone involved.
Right.
So if this subordinate person comes into my office in our conversation of what would you like to do different, what do you want to be different, and then how are we going to make that happen for you? It would start with, so what are you doing that's contributing to what's not working for you at work?
There you go. I have to say that that's where our work totally aligns, because at the end of the day, no matter where, and why I say, you'll get them because you need to find the pathology. What is it in the pattern that you're doing it? When that same exact person is with me, it's no shame, no blame, no rationalization. How did you get here? What do you want to do? Are you willing to do it?
Right.
And that's really what being brave enough ends up being about. But at the end of the day, knowing that, we chose, especially in corporations, and that's one of the hardest things, we put the shackles on ourselves when it comes to what happens to us within a corporation. We really can walk out at any given moment. It's what's in our head and what we keep thinking about the future that stops us from doing it. And that's what has to get backed up. So I would say that that's the point where our work just totally merges, because
It's so consistent. It
Yes.
is. And maybe with some of your clients you do, but with people that I generally work with, that dynamic, once we realize what the dynamic is going to be fundamentally rooted in early childhood learning, in trauma experiences in their life, in meaningful people in their life, in how their personality was built, and who they have become now. And they won't even see that the way they are interacting in this current situation is actually trying to compensate for something they learned a long time ago.
And I will admit, I rarely do that level of work unless they came in because of the trauma. Like I have someone who I've been working with and have done videos with, because she's very public about the work that we've done together. And it was based in a trauma. That generally isn't where I go initially, because people will come in with the definition that's something, for the vast majority of people who come, they have already been successful at some point. And they're just stuck, and they are sick of being stuck there one more time. So what I think I hear us saying is, people are really alike. How you get all these little curves. And at the end of the day, it's investing the time in finding out, how did I get where I am at this moment, so that I stop avoiding myself and actually get the next thing I'm trying to do in my life.
Always going to start with self-awareness. and then trying to act differently. If you learn something, and I say this all the time to people, if you learn something about yourself that you don't like, or your life that you don't like, you're unhappily married, you don't like your job, you whatever, and you are not willing to do something differently, psychologically it will hurt you more.
Right.
You will be more sad, more anxious, more depressed. Why?
Right.
Because you've realized something is true, and you have decided that you're not willing to change it.
Right.
That's actually where ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
That is incredibly painful.
Yeah, and that, I have to say, when I first heard that term, ignorance is bliss, I was in my early 20s, and I thought, wow, that really does explain a lot. I can pretend I don't know something, and then I don't have to take an action.
Amazing.
Not my problem. Yeah, it will be.
It will be.
It will
be.
Yeah, so if you were to leave just one last words of wisdom about when someone's stuck or thinks they're being mistreated in the workplace.
You have more power than you think. You have more power than you think you have. And if you focus on changing yourself, you can change the entire situation because you're going to be different. The environment has to change with you, or you'll leave it